Hi, everyone. For those that don't know me yet, I'm Rob Kay. I've worked in climate change for well over 30 years now, and I'm co founder of 319 Climate based in Los Angeles, California. Today with me is Emilie Mazzacurati, co founder and managing partner of Tailwind. She's a tech entrepreneur, investor, and advisor with over 20 years' experience working passionately to mitigate and adapt to climate change. Tailwind, an investment fund and consulting firm, focuses on accelerating the development and deployment of climate adaptation and resilience solutions. But only 5 years ago, back in 2019, Emilie sold her groundbreaking climate data business, 427, to Moody's, the Americans' rating agency. 427 pioneered the integration of climate data into financial decisions, helping banks and investors identify the physical impacts of climate change on their portfolios. Emilie's published over 30 articles, won numerous awards, including the US Sciences Poe Alumni Award and the Berkeley Visionary Award, and was also included in the list of top 100 people in finance in 2019. Her interest in all things climate also extend to her role as a board member for the non-profit Climate Resilience for All. I first met Emilie soon after moving to California back in 2014. Because she's such a thoughtful analyst and tireless innovator. She's always fun to hang out with, and I always feel richer for the experience. Emilie, welcome to the first 319 Innovating Climate Conversations.
Thank you, Rob. What an honor.
Oh, thanks. Well, thanks for joining me, and thanks especially for joining us all the way from France at the beginning of your vacation. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Hey, look, I'm going to dive in. Want to get to the why, actually, Emilie. I mean, given all the range of experience and skills that you bring into the space, why did you choose specifically to focus on innovation?
That's actually a really hard question. Um, I think it's both a reflection of the fact that we we need new solutions. The problems are getting more complex, deeper. We're not doing enough to solve them. There's a lot of political and economic financial resistance to addressing climate change. And so it's sort of for me a natural place to go is to see where we can find different solutions that maybe offer workarounds the probably intractable problems that we deal with. And then I think some of it is just my personal inclination, just, keep it fresh, learn something new. Um, that's just a better fit for who I am.
Right. It just really harnesses all the skills and experience that you can bring. Was there an inciting moment for you, actually, Emily, that actually why you really got into the space in the first place that you can recall in your mind's eye?
Well, I will say I am from a family of entrepreneurs, so I've always had an eye on, is there a point where it would make sense for me to start a company? And with 427, my previous company, focused on climate data analytics, it was very much a sort of a translation or an adjacent move. There was a business I knew solving problems for other businesses, and then I saw this other problem, and I saw similar kind of solutions that could be applied by bringing analytics, by sort of simplifying and translating uh, relevant information about climate for businesses, and so it was innovation, but it just felt like a natural extension of what the company that I worked for before was doing when I worked on analytics for carbon markets. And so sometimes innovation isn't just a crazy leap. Sometimes it's applying things that work well to different problems. With Tailwind, where we're ex- intentionally, explicitly focused on innovation, it was looking at the innovation and the innovation ecosystem around climate mitigation technologies and all the work that we're doing through investments and support for technologies that help us reduce greenhouse gas emissions and remove carbon from the atmosphere. And it's this similar, like, we're doing this for mitigation. Why are we not doing this for adaptation? So again, it's a deliberate focus on innovation, but it's also taking things that work elsewhere in other markets and applying them to what remains very much a frontier topic, which is climate adaptation.
Oh, that's really interesting. So, in a sense, the why can actually often be an adjacent reasons, actually, rather than actually having that sort of blue sky sort of spark of inspiration. I mean, I think a lot of work in innovation is perspiration just as much as it's innovation. Would you agree?
I think that's true. And I think innovation can be taking really good ideas that are proven elsewhere and applying them to new problems or tweaking them enough that they can offer very different solutions. And we see that across the board. We see that in medication, in pharmaceuticals, right? You see it in many other sectors.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, look, I'm going to pivot from the why a little bit into the wash. I just want to focus particularly on that pivot you were saying about the mitigation innovation technologies being sort of mature, much more mature than in the adaptation space. And I want to dig into two specific aspects of the work that you're doing. The first is actually around your taxonomy work that I find incredibly helpful myself. And just to talk about that for a second, and just really focus in on the work that you've really been doing about making sure that we're all speaking the same language. And you really took the next level there by developing the comprehensive taxonomy for climate adaptation and resilience that was published really recently back in 2000, in May of this year, right? And again, I want to go back to the why and really think about why did you develop that taxonomy and what did you draw on to develop it?
Well, I guess you're making me see a theme in how I think, but that was not that was not planted or prepared. Um, why we did it is because we spent a lot of time talking to investors who were active in climate tech, and in the most common acceptance nowadays, when people say climate tech, they're thinking decarbonization, greenhouse gas mitigation, carbon removal. And we got a lot of questions around what's the definition for adaptation, what's in scope, what does it mean to invest in adaptation? You can invest in a seawall. And so it felt like there was really some foundational knowledge that was missing from investors who were otherwise very knowledgeable about climate change. And that knowledge exists because people have been working, as you know well yourself, I believe, people have been working on adaptation for 20, 30 years. There is a rich body of knowledge that has been developed by the UN and its many agencies, rich science, a lot of work done by development finance institutions that have been doing work on adaptation in developing countries for a long time. And so, going back to the theme of one doesn't have to reinvent the wheel to bring value, we leveraged a lot of that existing body of knowledge, brought, widely accepted definitions for the term adaptation and resilience, and then applied that to a new set of sectors and thinking, right? And so
Mhm.
what we did with the taxonomy was really to show that adaptation goes beyond seawalls and whatever first comes to people's minds, but it's really about protecting human lives and livelihoods. And so then taking a step back and thinking, well, we need food and shelter, we need functional infrastructure, we need functional health systems, building on existing products and programs and existing taxonomies to both broaden the perspective, help climate tech investors who think energy, transportation, land use, help them look at other sectors, and then give a lot of very detailed examples of how can one do early stage equity, so venture capital or private equity investments into products and services that will support adaptation. And they may feed into infrastructure project. It might be better materials or better software for flood prevention systems, seawalls and others. Or it could be consumer products. So there's really a wide range, but you don't have to only think about publicly funded infrastructure, which is what typically people first comes to mind when you mention adaptation for many people.
Yeah, thanks. I like that too, and I also like the way that you really frame that from different perspectives in terms of the different sort of spectrum of adaptation investments around, prepare, respond, recover from particular climate events. You also are able to look at different sectors of the economy as well as you pointed out, and then I actually really particularly like the examples and the work that there's a downloadable Excel spreadsheet, has fantastic resources in there. I always tend to read technical documents from the back to the front, actually, but really sort of validating, oh, right, okay, actually all the resources are there here that this really is an incredible piece of work. And to that point, I just want to ask you about actually who worked with you, who helped you shaped the taxonomy.
Yeah, and so we'll talk a little bit about resources and sort of sources and partners, right? On the sources side, I want to highlight that the first thing that we did was go back to first principle, IPCC, AR6, so the latest report on climate change. There is a report on adaptation that has a set of very detailed chapters detailing how climate change is going to affect ecosystems, human habitat, human health, etc., and talking about some of the responses. So we started from that, and that helped shape how we thought about key sectors as well. The other key resource, and that ties up to who helped us shape the taxonomy, was a white paper developed by the Climate Bonds Initiative, CBI, as part of their own effort to develop a resilience taxonomy and a sort of a normative product about what is and isn't resilience investments. They had published a white paper last year that they've sort of built on, and they'll be releasing their full taxonomy later this year.
Mm-hmm.
That had a set of themes that had a lot of overlap with the IPCC breakdown as well. And so we looked at those, we looked at a few key other resources, but those were the two main, and settled on the set of 8 themes that we have. And then spent a lot of time discussing with Climate Bonds Initiative with the Climate Policy Initiatives, which every 2 years publishes the Global Landscape on Climate Finance, which is the reference report on how much climate finance is flowing globally, public and private. They themselves thought that the way they accounted for adaptation finance was needed to be upgraded and refined in terms of how they looked at sectors. And so we put our heads together and made sure that we generally agreed on the overall approach set of principles, overarching themes, so that while we're working towards very different audiences and sort of the product is different, the thinking and the signal that's being sent to the market are very similar. And a couple of other people I need to mention. The work was largely funded by Climate Works, which is a coalition of foundations that actually directs a lot of climate funding in the US and globally. And again, similar set of reasoning. They have a very detailed taxonomy to help them think and classify how money is flowing when it comes to mitigation. And adaptation was one bucket, just like in the global climate finance landscape until recently. And as they embrace and support their members who think through how they're going to be deploying philanthropic capital towards adaptation, they wanted to have a better understanding, much more granular, about where money was currently going, and how that informed the type of strategic recommendation they might offer going forward. So, long story short, we
Oh,
worked with people who have money, people who track how money is being spent, people who want to help direct how money will be spent going forward, and try to come up with a fairly intuitive, hopefully, framework to think about all the relevant topics for climate adaptation and resilience.
right. Look, thank you. And so what that really enables us to do, right, is to be able to look at the full funnel for resourcing, and then to
Mm-hmm.
be able to then provide feedback mechanisms and monitoring and evaluation systems that are talking about the same things, right? So that we can actually start to
Yeah.
build these virtuous circles, right, back from implementation to funding.
Yeah, and I'll add one more thing that's really important, both in terms of how it shaped the taxonomy, but also as I extend my thank you to our partners. We did a lot of market feedback. So we put an early version of the taxonomy in front of private investors, large financial institutions, boutique VC firms. We put in front of a lot of foundations and philanthropies. And we got a lot of feedback on what was intuitive, what was not, what was missing, and that helped shape the final product that you saw, which, probably imperfect in many ways, and there might be future iterations in the future, but we did our best to create a product that would be usable by those very different constituencies, because we see the financing as a continuum, right? It's a capital stack going from philanthropic grants all the way to pure blood commercial investments with every flavor of impact in the middle. And so we wanted those people to be able to use the same words and the same terminology, because at the end of the day, often investments will need some combination of different flavors of capital in that capital stack.
Oh, that's wonderful. And it's May, June. We're recording this at the end of July 22nd. So in the first 2-3 months since it's been released, how's it been received?
Look, I think it's been received well. I think there was a lot of products that were released in the spring with the goal of helping different constituencies understand climate adaptation. There was a guide on climate adaptation finance for bank. There was a couple of reports targeted at corporates to help them incorporate adaptation and resilience into their strategy. And so I think we're in a moment in the market where a lot of people are thinking about those issues, when there's much greater recognition that adaptation is a today and now problem rather than a tomorrow or elsewhere problem. And so I think the space is going to continue to evolve, but in the meanwhile, having those tools help pull in people, right? And we want more people to join the party. We need a lot of people. So I think it's doing its job. We're going to continue to do outreach, and again, this product is probably going to evolve. I'm glad you enjoyed the Excel spreadsheet. I think the product would have a lot more sort of broader appeal if we had some kind of user interface where people could interact with the data a little more easily. It's currently not the sort of the priority for us, but it's the kind of things we think about in the medium term.
Yeah, that was the next question. I mean, that seems to be where you're going, right? Actually, sort of deepening the outreach, the usability of the tool and the companion PowerPoint deck. Is that right?
On the taxonomy, so we're not doing more work right now on the product, though I'm the first to acknowledge that it could certainly use it. We're actually using the taxonomy ourselves, both to help inform our consulting work as we work with investors and startups who are entering the market, to help them think through where are the opportunities based on their priorities and their investment thesis. It's gonna help set the foundation for the next product that we're working on, which is a playbook on adaptation and resilience innovation, where we're looking at the market at large, which means who's investing, who are the startups and the providers of solutions, what are the needs, what kind of demand signal for adaptation and resilience products and services are we seeing from government, from corporates, from households, and where are the gaps? Where are we not seeing enough investments given what we know about climate risk and how the world is changing? So that's a piece that will release late fall, that will again leverage the taxonomy in how we think about where innovation is needed, what financing needs are, and where the opportunities are.
Oh, look, that's wonderful. And look, congratulations to you and your contributors for really
Thank
excellent
you.
product, Emilie. As I said before, I use it all the time. It really is a fabulous resource. One of the things that I think is particularly exciting about it is often you get the response of like, oh, that's not adaptation. That's not an adaptation in innovation. And yet, and it's like, well, you say neither, I say neither. Let's look at the taxonomy. Let's see where it fits in. And you're like, actually, yeah, right. That does actually fit in. That actually is either in the spectrum of preparing or proactively recovering from, or it's resilience building. It's like you can actually fit so much of what is needed in the here and now, as you've said, into that context of issues dealing with current day vulnerabilities while dealing with long term risks. So really, heartfelt congratulations. Look, I just want to turn from the taxonomy into your own climate innovation and funding role, Emilie, if I could for a second. I understand that you and your partner are personally funding projects as well as seeking co-funding. Could you talk to us a little bit about your own climate innovation fund?
Sure. So
Uh,
we currently have a small pilot fund that we're starting to deploy, focused on adaptation and resilience products and services. I'll refer to to the definition in the taxonomy, on a specific set of sectors that are of greatest interest to us. And specifically, we're looking at solutions that can help businesses uh, become better prepared and mitigate their risks. And the reason is twofold. One is, well, we think if there's corporates, large business, large enterprises, clients, there will be a bigger market. And if you're trying to run a VC fund, that is certainly something you're looking for. But also, because there is only so much public money to go around, we think that private companies are going to be in a position to deploy solutions that help them and help others at the same time. And so pulling them in to deploy solutions at the local level that also support local community resilience is going to be an interesting channel to get things done when there are limitations in what local governments can do, either financial or other restrictions uh, around projects. So that means we're looking at innovation in the built environment. If you think about facilities, manufacturing sites, we're looking at anything having to do with industry, manufacturing processes, looking at supply chain logistics, and looking at workers and workers' health, and that's a tie to human health more generally. But that is something that companies are worried about right now. And then, of course, what glues it all together when it comes to risk management, insurance, and new insurance products, in particular around dealing with climate risk. So fairly broad remit, but also if you think of the full scope of the taxonomy, we are not focused on a lot of adaptation and resilience funds are focused on ag and food. That is not our primary focus or even a priority at all. Um, we're really focused on the end user and sort of the ecosystem, the economics, the economic system and the infrastructure in which we live and operate as humans. Um,
oh, that,
and then, so we're not fundraising at this time. We are thinking about a second fund once we've deployed that, and we'll of course be looking for partners at that time. Um, to answer your other question.
yeah, well, I mean, wonderful. And so, how did you actually go about choosing those particular investments, Emily?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different steps or sort of investment criteria that we look at. The first one is this a good fit for investment thesis? So do we think of corporations that would be excited to hear about this technology and would want to start deploying? And would they want to start deploying next month, or would they be like, oh, let's, tell me about this in 3 years, right? We're looking for things that solve problems today. Um, and then there's, of course, all the due diligence that you would expect from an investment fund, ranging from understanding the product, the market, the competitive landscape, getting to know the team, looking at everything legal, looking at the financial model and whether we think it's credible, whether we think it's a good fit for the market, the product that they have. So it's, you know, it's a process where you spend a lot of time getting to know smart people doing smart things, and often you need to say no because it's not fit for whatever reason. And sometimes it's, you know, just that sweet spot, and you create a partnership, make a bet, and create a partnership that could last 10 years because we're coming in very early. We're coming in as
Hmm.
the seed or pre-seed stage. And so those companies may have many years ahead of them until they reach the point where either they get acquired, most likely they get acquired, or maybe we resell the share to someone else down the road, or they IPO, but that's not typically what we're focused on.
Hmm. It's so interesting. I think you're uniquely placed, both as a climate innovation expert and as an investor. So when you reflect on those two roles, I mean, what's that taught you?
It's really helpful to have been in the shoes of the founders and operators that we're talking to understand the psychology of how they engage with investors and what they're trying to show, and also what they're juggling and dealing with, and also the stress of how much runway do you have, how much, you know, can you close the deal, under what terms. Um, and having, you know, built and iterated many times over myself over a fundraising deck and a financial model, and trying to be both ambitious and also really realistic around how much sales can we do at what pace, how and why, like really thoughtful about that. So that's really a helpful background. My co-founder, Katie McDonald, has worked in the climate tech ecosystem for the past 10 years plus. And so she's worked with hundreds of startups, helping them make a good pitch and a good story. So she has amazing pattern recognition. Within a few minutes of talking to a startup, she's like, well, they need to work on this, this, and this. And we can help them on those two things, but here they're going to have to get help somewhere else, right? So we're able to detect very quickly what are the weak points in the story, and whether we think it's something that not just we can live with, but we can work with and actually bring some of the things they're missing, or whether it's a gap that just we're not comfortable taking on that risk, and would want to revisit later or just pass on to others.
Oh, that's fascinating. And so from that experience, if any advice for other would-be climate investors or innovators?
There are so many resources out there. It's both a great time because there are so many resources for individuals, for institutions, so much free knowledge, if I may, around different technologies, especially on mitigation, I will say. Um, and yet it's also challenging because there has been a lot of money invested in climate innovation, and I certainly wouldn't take the risk. I wouldn't be comfortable investing in a battery company, to give you an example. Why? Are we going to need a ton more batteries and better technology? Absolutely. Am I qualified to say which technology is better positioned given the economics and the actual science and technology that they use compared to what the industry needs? Like, it's really technical. And if you don't have that technical expertise, it's I think it can be easy to not have a good sense of whether a technology is really differentiated or well positioned. And so that would be about climate generally, about climate adaptation, because it's an emerging market. It's challenging right now. A lot of startups are focused on selling to governments, local governments in particular, because obviously local governments are going to be investing in adaptation as they should, but it's really hard to sell to local governments. And so not everybody has yet thought about, oh, in fact, I need to find a workaround. I do want to deploy in cities, but I want other payers, right? Is insurance going to pay? Are corporate, local corporations going to pay? Like, what are the systems that are going to help us deploy this technology without getting stuck into a 3-year procurement process?
Hmm.
With each local government that looks different for each local government. So um, I would say really think about the market, not just the technology, the team. It's a lot of considerations to weigh.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, that speaks, Emily, to perhaps the fact that there are multiple benefits from adaptation resilience investments that are not as simple as our friends over in the mitigation space that can just monetize everything back to a ton of CO2
Yes.
equivalency, right? And so it seems to me then it's around both taking the principles, if you like, from climate mitigation investments, but then actually really making sure that there's the specificity there into the adaptation and resilience world, speaking to the right experts in the right place. Is that fair to say?
I think that's true to a large extent, but I think when it comes to adaptation, we're going to have to borrow principles from a lot of different sectors. Because when you think about
Right.
the health implications of climate, we're going to be looking at investments in health tech, and that's the case of one of our portfolio companies. And here you're not looking at climate, you're looking at the healthcare sectors and the very thriving health innovation around pharmaceuticals and medical devices and life science and you name it, right? And so again, no need to reinvent the wheel, but you need to take your cue from a very different sector. And as you move into different parts of into different themes and sectors where adaptation and resilience need to occur, you're going to be looking at different templates in a way that you can then customize to apply more specifically to the needs of adaptation.
Yeah, that's really well said. Um, okay, look, I'm going to take a step back and just ask you about more broadly about the landscape of climate innovation. I mean, what are you seeing from the exciting trends in the market?
Well, I am excited that people are talking about adaptation and resilience, which was not the case 10 years ago when I started my first company. And nowadays there's not just a lot of excitement about climate data and climate analytics. We're even getting past the point where people are a little jaded. But there is an increasingly broad understanding that we do need innovation around adaptation and resilience, and that there might be business opportunities and commercial opportunities, which is a good thing because that brings more capital towards what otherwise remain a problem that's largely addressed through public funding right now. It's important to say that because we don't want people to think, oh, you're trying to make money out of people suffering. That's not the point. The point is, if it's just public money, it's not going to be enough, right? So how do we make it into something that's attractive to private capital? So I think that's exciting. Um, I think we've learned a lot through climate mitigation finance, different financing models for project infrastructure, for deploying new technologies that can again be used for adaptation. And so we don't need to reinvent the wheel on many things, but we do need to focus our attention on the specifics of adaptation and resilience.
Yeah, look, I agree with everything you've just said, and just actually reflecting back to just with some of your previous comments too about the hurdles in public sector procurement. I think there's a trend here that I think you've highlighted in terms of public sector agencies. Certainly, we've seen this in the US about developing like innovation zones, challenges, innovation challenges. Like a way of actually sort of lowering the public procurement bar, of course, recognizing this is taxpayers' money and of course has to be taken incredibly seriously, and really being able to put public money into an innovation
Mhm.
context and be able to really bring the strengths of those particular governments into that innovation ecosystem. Is that something that you're seeing too?
Absolutely. Yeah, very much so. And it's worked well. We see those collaborations around incubator programs like New Lab and Greentown Labs. And especially moving away from the coast and deploying into cities that maybe historically haven't been as known for their innovation and venture ecosystem. So Greentown Lab a whole new facility in Houston, new lab, which is based in New York, open a Detroit test bed. So there's some really exciting innovation happening there. Florida has started a Miami candidate. Miami-Dade has started an innovation zone focused on climate, and those really help both attract and lower the threshold to get startups um, to deploy their technology in what could be otherwise a fairly painful process.
Oh, that's really interesting. Thanks. Look, Emilie, I could talk to you for hours, but I feel like we need to start to draw this conversation to a close. And really, I'm sure anyone watching this or listening to this, reading this, is wanting to go and find further information about your work. So could you tell us about where we can actually find that information?
Yes, we have a website, tailwindclimate.com, one word, and that has information both about our publication and research, conferences, news and events, and others. So that's where you go.
Wonderful. Well, look, thank you, Emilie. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me, and looking forward to catching up with you when you get back into California.
Great. Thank you so much for having me, Rob. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.